Welcome back. Glad to have you here. For thousands of years, the galaxy believed the darkest region of space was empty, until a survey fleet discovered that someone had been guarding it. Here's how it happened. The first indication that Earth's moon contained a weapon appeared as a mistake in a gravitational map. Survey Commander Vale Orthis noticed it while standing beneath the suspended projection of the Sol system, 6,000 kilometers beyond the orbit of Neptune. The bridge of the hallowed measure had been built according to the geometric traditions of the Carad continuum. Every surface formed a perfect angle. Every light corresponded to a navigational constant. Even the crew stood at calculated distances from one another, preserving the symmetry that Carad philosophers believed separated reason from instinct. Yet the image before Vielle was not symmetrical. The moon orbiting Earth possessed too much mass. Not much, less than 1 part in 800,000, a discrepancy so small that a lesser vessel would have dismissed it as mineral density or computational drift. The hallowed measure was not a lesser vessel. It was the most advanced reconnaissance platform ever built by the Continuum, carrying instruments capable of measuring the gravitational influence of a single cargo ship from 3 star systems away. Vielle extended one silver hand toward the projection. His species possessed 6 narrow fingers, each joint covered in translucent scales that shimmered whenever blood moved beneath them. "Run the scan again," he ordered. Senior analyst Keth Arun lowered his head over the diagnostic console. His 4 black eyes flickered as lines of data moved across them. "The result is unchanged, Commander," Keth replied. "The satellite's measured mass exceeds its visible geological composition by approximately 940 trillion metric tons." Vielle watched the blue-white sphere of Earth turn beneath its smaller gray companion. 940 trillion tons could not be concealed by accident. The hallowed measure had entered the Sol system under the authority of the Galactic Cartographic Assembly, an institution older than 300 human generations. Its mission was simple: confirm the defensive capacity of humanity, assess the stability of the system, and determine whether the species should be admitted into the Assembly's protected trade network. Humanity had requested membership 12 years earlier. The request had been delayed because the Carad continuum considered humans unpredictable, not violent. Violence was measurable, not primitive. Primitive species followed familiar developmental curves. Humanity was unpredictable because its history contained contradictions. The species had constructed hospitals during wars. It had launched probes before unifying its planet. It had crossed interplanetary space using machines assembled by rival nations that had threatened one another with extinction only decades earlier. The Continuum distrusted contradictions. For nearly 4,000 years, Carad civilization had survived by identifying danger before danger became visible. Their ancestors had once inhabited 47 worlds along the Namur spiral. Then an enemy called the Valari had emerged from a region dismissed as strategically irrelevant. The Valari had destroyed 39 Carad worlds before the Continuum learned the cost of overlooking minor irregularities. Since that age, every anomaly was treated as a warning. Vielle studied the moon. "Is the additional mass distributed naturally?" he asked. Keth remained silent for several seconds. "No, Commander." A new shape appeared beneath the lunar surface. It was not complete. The hallowed measure could detect only differences in density, faint distortions passing through thousands of kilometers of rock. Yet as the ship's computers combined gravitational readings, neutrino reflections, and seismic echoes collected from abandoned human research beacons, the outline became unmistakable. Something enormous had been buried beneath the far side of the moon. It extended for 180 kilometers from end to end. Its central structure narrowed like the barrel of an ancient kinetic cannon. Around it lay concentric chambers, power conduits, and magnetic containment rings vast enough to encircle cities. No known mining operation required such architecture. No transportation network needed to be aimed. Keth lifted his head. "Commander," he said, "the structure is aligned along a fixed interstellar vector." Vielle felt the scales along his arms tighten. "Toward the Continuum?" he asked. "No." "Toward an inhabited system?" "No." "Then where?" Keth magnified the projection. A line emerged from the moon, crossed the outer planets, and continued beyond the mapped frontier of the Orion Spur. The weapon is pointed away from every known civilization, Keth said. Its firing axis terminates in uncharted space. The bridge became still. For 200 years, the Karad continuum had ranked military threats according to intention. Weapons aimed at enemies were dangerous. Weapons aimed at allies were treacherous. Weapons kept in reserve were deterrents. A weapon aimed at nothing had no category. Vale stared at the line extending into the dark. "Contact the assembly," he ordered. "Priority black." Keth hesitated. "The humans will detect the transmission. Let them." "Commander, the lunar structure appears inactive. Revealing our knowledge may force a response." Vale turned toward him. "There is already a response, analyst. It was built before we arrived." The transmission crossed 21 light-years through the assembly's relay network. 8 hours later, the Galactic Cartographic Assembly convened an emergency session. Representatives from 63 civilizations gathered through quantum projection inside the Chamber of Celestial Order. Most had never visited Earth. Many had opposed humanity's application based on economic concerns, territorial caution, or the species' refusal to disclose the full extent of its military infrastructure. Now the projection of Earth's moon rotated above the center of the chamber. Arbiter Seltovan of the Karad Continuum presided from a raised platform. He was older than Vale by nearly a century, his once translucent scales clouded by age. "The evidence is conclusive," Seltovan told the assembly. "Humanity has concealed a weapons installation beneath its natural satellite. Its dimensions exceed any defensive system previously declared to this body." The ambassador of the Pell Republic unfolded 3 feathery arms. "Could it be a propulsion device?" she asked. "Humans have proposed moving asteroids for industrial purposes." "The object contains a focused emission channel," Seltovan replied. "Its internal geometry is designed to direct energy along a single vector." A delegate from the Marin Coalition leaned forward. "What magnitude of energy?" Seltovan looked toward the chamber's central projection. "Unknown." The word disturbed the assembly more than any number could have. Every recognized civilization possessed weapons, planetary shields, antimatter missiles, relativistic projectiles, stellar disruption charges. Their destructive capacities were documented and regulated by treaty. Unknown meant unregulated. Unknown meant unmeasured. Unknown meant human. The ambassador of the Vare Compact shifted within his liquid-filled environment sphere. "The structure is pointed away from inhabited territory," he observed. "That does not make it harmless," Seltovan said. "It may make it less threatening. Or more." The chamber dimmed as Vale's report appeared beside the lunar projection. The hallowed measure had continued scanning while the assembly debated. Its newest data revealed that the buried structure was not merely large, it was ancient. Sections of the outer casing appeared to predate humanity's first crewed landing on the moon. The revelation spread through the delegates in waves of disbelief. "That is impossible," the Pell ambassador said. "Humans did not possess subterranean construction technology in that era." "Correct," Seltovan replied. "Then the weapon is not human." Vale's recorded voice answered from the projection. "The surrounding excavation is human. The access shafts are human. The power network is human. Whatever existed first, humanity expanded it." A second image appeared. Across the far side of the moon, concealed beneath regolith and electromagnetic masking fields, hundreds of thermal conduits formed a pattern resembling roots around the central structure. Humanity had not discovered the object and abandoned it. Humanity had been maintaining it for more than a century. Seltovan faced the assembly. "We must assume the humans know what it is." A murmur moved through the chamber. "Then why have they never disclosed it?" asked the Vare ambassador. Seltovan's 4 eyes narrowed. "That is what Commander Vael will determine." The hallowed measure altered course for Earth. Vael did not approach as an enemy. He transmitted diplomatic credentials, reduced his ship's shields, and followed the navigational corridor provided by human traffic control. Yet every Karad officer aboard understood that the vessel was entering the range of a weapon capable of hiding beneath a moon. No human warships intercepted them. That absence increased Vail's concern. Earth's orbital space was crowded with civilian movement. Passenger vessels climbed from equatorial launch rings. Cargo haulers crossed between stations. Solar collectors turned above the atmosphere like immense black flowers. Humanity's system did not resemble a fortress, it resembled a construction site. At the center of the activity floated a diplomatic station named Concordance, a rotating structure of glass, steel, and living gardens. Its open architecture would have horrified Karad military planners. It possessed no visible armor. Its defensive batteries were limited to debris interception. Vial's shuttle docked without resistance. Ambassador Elena Varga met him beneath a grove of maple trees grown inside the station's central cylinder. She was 58 years old, with dark hair streaked by silver and the steady posture of someone accustomed to speaking while entire governments listened. Beside her stood Admiral Marcus Hale of the Terran Defense Directorate. Hale wore no ceremonial medals. His uniform was plain gray, marked only by a small blue emblem of Earth and the Moon. Vial immediately noticed the emblem. "Ambassador, Admiral," he said. "Thank you for receiving us." Elena inclined her head. "Your request indicated urgency." "It does." They entered a conference chamber overlooking Earth. The planet filled half the window, its oceans reflecting sunlight across the room. Vial did not sit. "My vessel has detected an artificial structure beneath your moon." Neither human reacted. That confirmed more than surprise would have. Elena folded her hands on the table. "What kind of structure?" "You know what kind." Admiral Hale looked toward Earth rather than Vial. "Then your instruments are better than we expected," he said. Vial felt a surge of alarm. "Expected?" Elena gave Hale a brief glance, but the Admiral did not withdraw the statement. The Karad commander moved closer to the table. "The structure has the geometry of a weapon. It extends 180 kilometers beneath the lunar crust. It possesses a mass greater than many orbital stations combined. It is connected to a planetary-scale power network, and its primary axis is aimed beyond charted space." Elena remained calm. "That assessment is broadly accurate." "Broadly? Some of the measurements are outdated." Vial's fingers curled. "You admit that humanity built it?" "No," Elena said. "We admit that humanity finished it." For several seconds, the room contained only the distant mechanical hum of the station. Vial examined both humans for signs of deception. The Karad had developed entire sciences around involuntary movement, vocal stress, and vascular change. Elena's pulse was stable. Hale's breathing had not shifted. They believed what they were saying. Vial lowered himself into the chair. "Explain." Elena looked to Admiral Hale. The Admiral touched the table and the glass surface became a screen. A black and white image appeared. It showed the lunar landscape under harsh sunlight. 3 human figures in bulky pressure suits stood beside a shallow crater. Their technology was primitive by modern standards. Their spacecraft consisted of thin metal walls, exposed framework, and guidance computers weaker than a child's educational device. The image had been taken in the 21st century during one of humanity's earliest permanent expeditions to the far side of the Moon. Admiral Hale enlarged the crater. At its center stood a smooth black fragment. It was no larger than a human hand. The first piece was found by geologist Dr. Amara Ilian in 2039, Hale said. It was embedded 12 meters below the surface. No weathering, no radiation damage, no identifiable manufacturing marks. Vial leaned closer. Material composition? Unknown then, mostly unknown now. Elena continued. Within 5 years, human teams found 37 additional fragments. Each was positioned along a curve. The image changed. The fragments formed a line across the lunar far side, separated by hundreds of kilometers. At first, scientists assumed they belonged to a shattered vessel. Then they realized each fragment was part of the same continuous object, buried deep beneath the crust. Vial looked from the screen to the humans. "How old?" "At least 112 million years," Hale replied. The number struck the room like an impact. No technological civilization in the assembly possessed a confirmed artifact older than 9 million years. Vial's voice became quieter. "Why was this never reported?" Elena answered without defensiveness. "Because when we discovered what it was facing, we became afraid that reporting it might reveal our position to whatever had placed it there." The screen displayed a star map. The weapons firing line appeared again, extending away from Earth. This time it did not end in empty space. Human astronomers had projected the vector backward through the movement of stars, accounting for more than 100 million years of galactic rotation. The line crossed the location where the Sol system had existed when the artifact was constructed. Then it continued outward. At the end of the projection lay a dark region between spiral arms, a gulf nearly 3,000 light-years across. No stars illuminated it. No radio emissions emerged from it. No assembly vessel had ever crossed it. Vale had seen the region on maps. Every civilization had. It was called the Eridani Silence. The continuum classified it as a naturally sparse zone where stellar formation had failed. Humanity had given it another name, the Watcher's Sea. Hale expanded the map. The lunar device was built to fire into that region, he said. Fire at what? We do not know. Vale turned toward Elena. Yet you completed it. We completed what we could, she replied. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one. Vale stood again. You found an ancient weapon aimed into unexplored space, concealed it from the galaxy, and restored it without knowing its target. Hale's expression hardened. We knew one thing about its target. What? Something had frightened its builders enough to place the weapon here. Vale stared at him. Humanity had encountered countless ruins since leaving Earth. Most species treated ancient weapons as hazards. They dismantled them, isolated them, or placed them under international supervision. Humans had done something else. They had found an unfinished gun beneath their moon and chosen to repair it. Vale moved toward the window. Earth turned below, beautiful and exposed. How many people know? He asked. 31 governments, Elena replied. The senior command of the Terran Defense Directorate. Several scientific institutions. Approximately 12,000 engineers and lunar personnel. That many, and the secret remained contained? We did not conceal its existence from our own people, Hale said. The lunar project is publicly described as a deep space defense installation. We concealed its origin and direction. Vale faced him. Why? Because people deserve to know they are being defended, Hale replied. They do not always deserve to inherit fear without evidence. Vale considered the answer. It was another contradiction. Humanity had hidden the truth to avoid panic, yet admitted the existence of the weapon to avoid deception. The continuum would have chosen one principle and followed it completely. Humans carried opposing principles and somehow moved between them. Elena deactivated the display. Commander, you came here expecting a threat. The weapon is not directed at the assembly. It has never targeted an inhabited system. That does not absolve you. No, she said, but it should change the question. Vale's scales darkened. What question? Not why humanity built a weapon beneath its moon. Elena looked toward the black region on the star map. Why someone built it there before humanity existed. The assembly did not accept the explanation. Within 12 hours, 3 investigation fleets entered the Sol system. Their ships belonged to the Karad Continuum, the Pel Republic, and the Vare Compact. Together they carried more than 600 specialists, military observers, archaeologists, and treaty officers. Humanity permitted them to approach the moon. It did not permit them to enter the weapon. That refusal transformed concern into suspicion. The assembly demanded full access. Earth offered shared sensor data, construction records, material samples, and historical archives. It refused physical entry to the central chamber. Arbiter Sel Tovan addressed Elena Varga through a secure projection. You are asking 63 civilizations to trust a species that has concealed an ancient superweapon for more than a century, he said. Elena stood inside the Lunar Security Council chamber, surrounded by representatives from Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. We are asking you not to interfere with a system whose failure conditions you do not understand, she replied. Neither do you. We understand them better than anyone else. That is not sufficient. It has been sufficient for 123 years. Sel Tovan's image grew larger. Then perhaps your good fortune has lasted 123 years. Admiral Hale stepped beside Elena. The core is unstable when exposed to external fields. Your scanning vessels have already increased containment fluctuations by 0.03%. The Arbiter's expression did not change. A negligible amount. The weapon stores energy equivalent to the total output of your home star over 19 days, Hale said. 0.03% is not negligible. For the first time, Seltovan hesitated. The number had not been included in humanity's initial disclosure. The arbiter lowered his voice. You have measured its capacity. Partially. Could it destroy a planet? Hale looked directly into the projection. It was not built for planets. The transmission ended without agreement. Above the moon, the investigation fleets began repositioning. Commander Vale remained aboard the hallowed measure, increasingly divided between duty and instinct. Keth Arun stood beside him as human construction records flowed through the bridge displays. They showed decades of work beneath the lunar surface. Vast caverns had been excavated around the ancient structure. Human engineers had installed fusion plants, magnetic stabilizers, coolant reservoirs, and control systems. The project had consumed more resources than the construction of 20 orbital cities. Yet humanity had never attempted to move the weapon. Every modification served the same purpose. Preserve its alignment. Keth highlighted a structural diagram. Commander, there is something unusual here. Vile examined the image. The ancient device rested inside a channel running through the moon. Humanity had reinforced the channel with materials designed to absorb recoil. What do you see? The reinforcement does not protect the moon, Keth said. Explain. If the weapon fires at projected capacity, the lunar crust will fracture despite these measures. Human engineers know this. Their calculations show a 74% probability of catastrophic mantle failure. Vale studied the supporting equations. Then why reinforce it at all? Keth expanded the diagram. The structures are not intended to save the moon. They are intended to keep the barrel aligned for 3.8 additional seconds after ignition. Vale felt cold move through his chest. Humanity had spent a century reinforcing its moon, not so the moon would survive firing, but so the weapon could remain accurate while the moon died around it. The implication silenced both officers. Keth eventually spoke. Commander, I believe the humans expect to use it. Vale looked toward Earth. Or they expect someone else to force them to. Elsewhere beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Maya Okafor stood inside Control Vault 7 and watched red warning symbols multiply across the containment display. She was the chief systems engineer of Project Lantern, the human name for the ancient weapon. For 26 years, she had studied machinery built before mammals ruled Earth. She understood only fragments of it. No human knew how the weapon generated its full discharge. No scientist could identify the origin of the dark crystalline material lining its central chamber. No language team had translated the markings etched into its deepest components. Humanity had learned through patience. Touch one mechanism and observe another. Introduce power slowly. Listen for changes. For more than a century, Project Lantern had been less like engineering and more like caring for a sleeping creature. Now that creature was waking. Maya moved between consoles as technicians reported rising fluctuations. External neutrino saturation increasing, a technician said. Source, the assembly vessels. Their active scans are interacting with the focusing lattice. Maya opened a direct channel to Admiral Hale. We need those ships to stop scanning, she said. Immediately. Hale's voice came from Concordance Station. I have told them. Tell them again. They believe the risk is exaggerated. Maya looked through the vault's observation window. Beyond it lay a chamber 20 kilometers wide. The ancient weapon disappeared into darkness in both directions. A black cylinder surrounded by rings of human machinery. Lightning moved silently along its surface, crawling through engraved channels that no one had ever understood. It is not exaggerated, Maya said. The core is responding to something. Hale became quiet. To the scans, Maya watched the data. At first, she thought so. Then a new signal appeared. It came not from the assembly fleet, not from Earth, and not from any recognized beacon. It arrived from beyond the solar system. A pulse of gravitational distortion so faint that no ordinary sensor would have registered it. The ancient weapon registered it. Across 180 kilometers of buried machinery, dormant systems activated in sequence. One ring, then another, then thousands. Maya's breath stopped. Admiral, she said. "The device has received a signal." "Where from?" She traced the vector. The answer was already known. The Watcher's Sea. On the bridge of the hallowed measure, every navigational display went black. A moment later, the screens returned, filled with static. Keth's hands moved rapidly across his console. "Commander, a gravitational wave has entered the system." "Natural? No. It is repeating." Vale looked toward the moon. The lunar weapon's thermal signature was rising. Within seconds, alarms spread across all 3 investigation fleets. Human traffic control ordered civilian vessels away from lunar space. Defense ships emerged from concealed orbital docks, not with weapons aimed at the assembly, but with engines burning toward evacuation corridors. Admiral Hale appeared on every military channel. "All vessels are ordered to cease active scanning and withdraw from the lunar perimeter," he said. "This is not a request. The installation has entered an autonomous activation cycle." Arbiter Seltovan responded from the Karad command ship. "You will provide immediate access to the control center." "Negative. The weapon is activating under your authority." "It is activating beyond our authority." "Then shut it down." Hale's voice remained controlled. "We cannot." Across the moon's far side, the surface began to move. Dust lifted in enormous circular patterns. Mountain ridges trembled. Cracks opened along ancient fault lines, glowing faintly with the light of buried energy conduits. The assembly ships retreated. Not because they obeyed humanity, because the moon was unfolding. Sections of the lunar crust separated along lines invisible moments earlier. Hundreds of square kilometers of rock rose on colossal support structures. Beneath them appeared armored apertures, radiator fields, and black metallic towers, constructed by human hands around something far older. Vale stood motionless before the bridge window. The moon had always presented a quiet gray face to the galaxy. Now that face opened like an eye. From beneath the widening crust emerged the upper edge of the weapon's central channel. It did not resemble a cannon built by any living civilization. Its surface absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Stars vanished behind its outline. Space around it appeared distorted, as though the object pressed against dimensions no sensor could identify. Keth whispered the words almost unwillingly. "What is it aimed at?" Vale looked toward the distant stars, the same place it has always been aimed. Human ships formed a defensive perimeter around the moon. Their weapons remained cold, their shield projectors turned inward. They were not preparing to attack. They were preparing to contain the consequences. Inside Control Vault 7, Maya Okafor entered the central command chamber with 6 engineers and 1 military officer. The room had been constructed at the edge of the ancient firing mechanism, where human controls connected to interfaces that had resisted every attempt at translation. For decades, the primary display had shown only a field of dark symbols. Now the symbols were moving. Lines converged into a single image, a circle. Inside the circle, thousands of points appeared and vanished. Maya approached the display. "Doctor," the military officer said, "do you understand it?" "No." The points continued multiplying. Then one of the engineers gasped. "It is a map." Maya saw it. The points were stars, not current stars. Ancient positions. The machine was displaying the galaxy as it had existed when the weapon was constructed. A black region expanded across the map, the Watcher's Sea. Within it, something moved. Not a fleet, not a planet, a boundary. A vast curved front crossed the dark region, erasing stars behind it. Maya felt every assumption of the last century collapse. The Watcher's Sea had never been empty, it had been consumed. Admiral Hale's voice entered the chamber. "Maya, report." She stared at the spreading darkness. "The weapon was not built to attack something inside the region," she said. "Then what was it built to do?" "Hold the edge." Another gravitational pulse struck the system. The ancient symbols changed. This time, one translated automatically through the human interface. The machine had spent a century observing human language, adapting itself to its caretakers. 3 words appeared. Barrier, failure, imminent. The message reached the assembly. For the first time in 4,000 years, The Karad continuum faced a danger for which it possessed no doctrine. Arbiter Sel Tovan ordered every available sensor toward the Watcher's Sea. The Pel Republic activated long-range observatories. The Vare Compact searched gravitational archives dating back 8 centuries. Evidence emerged almost immediately. Stars near the dark region had been dimming, not suddenly, not dramatically. One by one, across thousands of years, the changes had been overlooked because no civilization monitored empty space closely. Each lost star had been explained as dust, collapse, or measurement error. Humanity had noticed. Decades earlier, human astronomers had cataloged the disappearances. They had compared them to the weapons alignment. They had found that the firing vector shifted by fractions of a degree every year, tracking the edge of the darkness. Project Lantern was not aimed at a fixed target. It was following one. Sel Tovan contacted Elena Varga. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Known? Only minutes." "Suspected?" Elena stood inside the Concordance Emergency Center as personnel rushed behind her. 71 years. And you told no one. We submitted 12 scientific requests to survey the region. The Assembly rejected all of them. Sel Tovan remembered the requests. The Continuum had classified them as inefficient uses of resources. Why did you not disclose the weapon then? Because we had no proof connecting the two. You had enough proof to rebuild it. Elena's face tightened. No, Arbiter. We had enough uncertainty to avoid dismantling the only object in the galaxy pointed in the correct direction. On the hallowed measure, Vale watched new signals enter the system. They came from every direction beyond Neptune. Small gravitational distortions appeared across the outer boundary of Sol. At first there were dozens, then hundreds, then tens of thousands. Keth struggled to isolate them. "Objects are emerging from subspace," he reported. "Ships? Unknown. Size? Variable. The largest is approximately 400 kilometers across." Vale's bridge crew stared at the tactical display. The objects had not traveled through normal space. They had followed the gravitational pulse. They appeared as shadows against the stars, shapes that sensors could not hold. Each possessed mass without consistent volume. Some stretched across thousands of kilometers and then compressed to points. Others flickered between positions, as if testing different versions of reality. The first object reached the orbit of Neptune. The planet's outer rings vanished. Not shattered, not burned. Vanished. Every particle within a region, 8,000 kilometers wide, ceased to register in physical space. Vale felt the old terror of his species rise within him. The Volari had destroyed worlds. These things removed the space where worlds existed. A human transmission reached the fleet. "All assembly vessels are cleared to withdraw through the inner corridor," Admiral Hale said. "Human defense ships will cover your retreat," Sel Tovan answered. "You cannot fight this alone." Hale looked exhausted now, but not afraid. "We never planned to." The Arbiter's image stiffened. "Explain." "The moon is the first weapon," Hale said. "It was never the only one. Across the Sol system, human infrastructure changed purpose. Mining stations near Saturn rotated, revealing shield generators beneath their processing arrays. Solar collectors around Mercury redirected their mirrors toward transmission nodes. Civilian power grids reduced consumption as energy surged into underground facilities on Earth and Mars. For more than a century, humanity had constructed ordinary systems around extraordinary contingencies. Not a hidden armada. Not a secret empire. A network. Every colony, station, power plant, and transport hub had been designed with secondary functions. Civilian fusion reactors became energy relays. Cargo tugs became towing vessels for defensive platforms. Communications satellites synchronized into a system-wide targeting lattice. Humanity had not spent 100 years preparing to conquer the galaxy. It had spent 100 years preparing to stand at the entrance. Vael watched millions of human civilians move into shelters across Earth. There was no mass panic. The existence of Project Lantern had been public. Its purpose had not. Now the truth spread across human networks. The moon is activating. An unknown force is entering the system. Evacuation protocols are in effect. Stay calm. Help those near you. Humanity responded not with silence, but motion. Doctors reported to emergency centers. Transport crews redirected vessels. Lunar workers remained at their stations despite knowing the moon might not survive. Vale turned to Keth. What are the human defense ships doing? Keth examined the tactical pattern. They are not forming attack lines. Then what? They are directing the intruders toward the lunar firing axis. The first wave crossed Saturn's orbit. Human vessels struck them with controlled bursts, not attempting destruction. The weapons altered local gravity, nudging each impossible shape inward. Some human ships were disabled when the shadows passed near them. Others vanished entirely. Still the formation held. Admiral Hale commanded from the Terran flagship Resolute Dawn, a vessel smaller than every assembly battleship present. Its hull had been built for atmospheric rescue operations before being converted into a military command ship. Vale opened a direct channel. Admiral, your ships cannot survive contact with those entities. Hale's image appeared amid flickering lights. We are aware. Withdraw behind the assembly fleet. We possess stronger shields. Your shields are optimized for energy and matter. These things are neither in any consistent sense. And yours are? No. Vale stared at him. Then why remain? Hale looked toward something beyond the projection. Because the weapon needs time. On the moon, Maya Okafor stood before the ancient interface. The firing sequence had begun, but energy was accumulating unevenly. The weapon's original power source had died millions of years ago. Human systems were feeding it through improvised connections across the Sol network. The amount was insufficient. Maya watched the projected barrier collapse. The machine displayed flashes of the past. An unknown civilization had built stations along the edge of the Watcher's Sea. They had fought for thousands of years. They had transformed moons into weapons, stars into anchors, entire systems into barriers. They had failed. The lunar device had been their final unfinished emplacement. Earth's moon had not been chosen because of humanity. Humanity had emerged beneath it by chance. Or perhaps not entirely by chance. The ancient builders had selected the moon because the Sol system occupied a gravitational intersection, a place where the structure of space could be reinforced. They had begun construction. Then they had disappeared. Maya realized the weapon was not a gun. It was a needle. Its discharge would stitch a fracture in reality closed. Admiral Hale entered the command channel. Status? The device needs more power, Maya replied. How much? At least 4 times current input. We do not have 4 times. Then it will fail. Hale looked down. What if we open the solar reserves? Earth's magnetic shield will weaken. For how long? If the discharge completes, 6 minutes. And if it does not? Maya did not answer. Hale understood. The solar reserves were energy buffers positioned around Earth to reinforce its magnetosphere during stellar storms. Releasing them would expose billions of people to radiation if the weapon failed. Maya waited for the Admiral to ask whether she was certain. He did not. Use them, Hale said. The order passed across Earth. For 6 minutes, the planet's defensive field would be reduced to a fraction of its strength. The human governments approved unanimously, not because they believed survival was guaranteed, because the alternative had already reached Saturn. Solar energy surged through transmission stations. Mercury's collectors aligned into a ring of fire. Beams invisible to the human eye crossed millions of kilometers, converging on the moon. The lunar weapon brightened, not with light, with absence. A dark line formed along its barrel, so perfectly black that the stars behind it disappeared. The surface of the moon began to crack. From the hallowed measure, Vale watched canyons open across the far side. Human shield generators projected fields over inhabited bases, but none attempted to preserve the weapon's outer structure. Keth's earlier analysis had been correct. The moon was not meant to survive. The weapon required 3.8 seconds of stable alignment. Humanity had reinforced it for exactly that long. The first shadow entity reached the orbit of Mars. Human defense ships fell back in sequence, guiding it toward the firing corridor. Behind it came thousands more, spreading through the system like ink through water. The assembly fleet opened fire. Karad lances struck the entities and vanished into them. Pel kinetic weapons altered course before impact. Vair containment fields collapsed instantly. Nothing slowed the advance. Sel Tovan contacted Vale. "Commander, evacuate your vessel." Vale looked around the bridge of the hallowed measure. His crew waited. The Continuum's doctrine demanded preservation. Survival before pride. Withdrawal before uncertainty. For 4,000 years, that doctrine had protected them. Now it offered no answer. Vale remembered the humans reinforcing a moon they knew would break. He remembered Admiral Hale's ships holding position without effective shields. He remembered Elena Varga asking the question the assembly had ignored. Why had someone built the weapon there? Vale straightened. "No, Arbiter." Sel Tovan's image sharpened. "Repeat. The human targeting network is losing vessels. Our sensor resolution is superior. We can help guide the entities into alignment. That is not our conflict." Vale looked toward the moon. "It has crossed 3,000 light-years to reach this system. I do not believe it will stop at human borders." Sel Tovan remained silent. Then the Arbiter turned toward his own officers. "All Continuum vessels," he ordered, "integrate with human command." Across the system, the assembly joined the defense. Karad survey ships mapped the shifting mass of the entities. Pel vessels deployed kinetic screens to alter their movement. Vair ships generated fluid gravity wells, forcing the shadows toward the center of the corridor. The combined fleets could not destroy the invaders. They could aim them. For the first time, 63 civilizations fought beside humanity under a moon built by the dead. Inside Control Vault 7, the ancient display changed again. A countdown appeared. Maya recognized no numerals, yet somehow understood them. 20 seconds. The weapon was ready. The target was not. The largest shadow entity remained outside the firing corridor, moving toward Earth. Admiral Hale saw it on the tactical display. Its path intersected the planet in 9 minutes. The Resolute Dawn turned. Vale's voice entered the command channel. "Admiral, do not engage. Your vessel lacks sufficient mass to redirect it." Hale watched Earth grow before him. The flagship's crew understood the maneuver before he announced it. The Resolute Dawn had once towed damaged colony ships. Its engines were designed for sustained gravitational coupling. If it could attach a field to the entity, it might pull the shadow a fraction of a degree. That fraction would place it inside the lunar axis. "Helm," Hale said, "intercept course." The bridge officer looked at him. "Field contact may erase the ship. I know. Evacuation pods? No time." The Resolute Dawn accelerated. Its engines burned white as it crossed the space between Earth and the approaching darkness. The shadow distorted around it, stretching like a wound across the stars. Hale opened a channel to Maya. "How long do you need?" 12 seconds. He looked at the entity. "You have 10. The flagship activated its towing field. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the ship began to disappear. Its forward hull blurred. Entire sections vanished from sensors. The gravitational field screamed through every system as the entity resisted physical influence. Hale gripped the command rail. "Increase output. Engines exceed tolerance," the helm officer reported. "Increase it." The Resolute Dawn's reactors surged. Slowly, impossibly, the shadow changed direction. 1/10 of a degree. 2/10. The moon's firing corridor turned green. Maya saw the confirmation. Target aligned. She placed her hand on the ancient control. The machine did not require a code. It required intention. For 112 million years, the weapon had waited beneath the moon. For 123 years, humanity had repaired its chambers, fed its circuits, and guarded its silence. Now the ancient interface recognized a living hand. Maya pressed down. The moon fired. There was no explosion. There was no beam of light. For an instant, every sound in Control Vault 7 ceased. Every screen went white. Every person in the Sol system felt a pressure behind the eyes, as though the universe had drawn a breath. Then a line appeared across space. It began beneath the lunar surface and extended beyond the outer planets, beyond the advancing entities, beyond the edge of the solar system. The line was thinner than light and darker than emptiness. Where it passed, reality folded. The shadow entities froze. Across the Watcher's Sea, an invisible fracture became visible for the first time. It stretched between the stars like shattered glass, a wound thousands of light-years long. The lunar weapon struck its edge. Space closed. Not instantly. The fracture resisted. The moon began to break apart around the weapon. Mountains lifted from the surface. Ancient craters collapsed. Human reinforcement rings ignited one after another, each holding the central channel in place for fractions of a second. 1 second. The first ring failed. 2 seconds. The far side of the moon split from pole to pole. 3 seconds. Control Vault 7 tilted as gravity shifted. Technicians were thrown against restraint harnesses. Maya kept her hand on the interface. 3.8 seconds. The final reinforcement ring collapsed. The barrel moved, but the discharge had already passed. Across the dark region, the fracture sealed in a chain reaction. Stars hidden for millennia reappeared. Gravitational waves rolled outward, not as an attack, but as the release of tension older than humanity. The shadow entities inside the Sol system lost coherence. Some dissolved into clouds of harmless particles. Others folded inward and vanished. The largest entity released the Resolute Dawn. The human flagship emerged with half its hull missing and every primary system dark. It drifted above Earth, alive. The lunar weapon shut down. What remained of the moon did not fall apart completely. Human stabilizers, emergency fields, and assembly gravity projectors caught the largest fragments. The satellite was scarred by a glowing canyon across its far side, but it remained in orbit. It would never look the same again. Neither would the galaxy. For 11 minutes, no one transmitted. Across the fleets, thousands of crews stared toward the Watcher's Sea. The empty region was no longer empty. Faint stars shone within it. Not many. Enough. On the hallowed measure, Keth Arun studied the final sensor report. "Commander," he said, "the gravitational barrier is stabilizing. For how long? The system cannot determine it." Vale looked toward the wounded moon. "Then we will learn." The assembly gathered again 3 days later. This time, the Chamber of Celestial Order contained no accusations. A projection of the moon floated at its center. The far side remained fractured, surrounded by repair vessels from dozens of civilizations. Elena Varga stood before the delegates as humanity's representative. Arbiter Sel Tovan descended from his platform. "The Karad Continuum has completed its assessment," he said. Elena waited. "The lunar installation is not an offensive weapon." "No," she replied. "It is a defensive mechanism of unprecedented scale." "Yes, humanity concealed it. We did." Sel Tovan's scales shifted faintly. "And humanity preserved it when dismantling it would have been safer in the short term." Elena looked toward the projection. "We believed short-term safety was not the only kind worth protecting." The Arbiter considered her words. For thousands of years, the Karad had survived by avoiding uncertainty. Humanity had survived by preparing for it. Sel Tovan turned to the assembly. "The Continuum withdraws its objection to humanity's membership." The Pell Republic followed. Then the Vaer Compact. One by one, the votes changed. Humanity entered the Galactic Cartographic Assembly not as a minor species seeking access to trade routes, but as the civilization that had inherited the oldest watch in known space. Project Lantern was placed under joint protection, though operational command remained human by unanimous agreement. No delegate challenged that condition. Over the next 50 years, fleets crossed the Watcher's Sea. They found ruins scattered across dead systems. They found fragments of the civilization that had built the lunar weapon. They found evidence of battles fought before Earth possessed oceans in their modern form. Among the ruins, they discovered a final archive. Its language required decades to translate. When the message was understood, it contained no account of victory, only a request. Hold the line until someone else is ready. The ancient builders had not known who would come after them. They had left no chosen heir. They had simply placed unfinished defenses across worlds where life might one day rise. On one small moon, around one ordinary planet, life had risen. It had looked upward. It had found the weapon. And rather than point it toward its neighbors, humanity had preserved the direction chosen by hands long turned to dust. The moon became a symbol across the galaxy. Its scar could be seen from Earth without instruments, a pale fracture crossing the night. Children on 63 worlds learned why it was broken. They learned of the engineers who had spent generations repairing a machine they barely understood. They learned of the ships that guided darkness into the firing line. They learned of a species that had armed its moon, not to rule the stars, but to guard the road leading to them. The Karad changed their doctrine. No longer did they classify every anomaly as a threat to be avoided. Some anomalies, their philosophers wrote, were warnings left by those who had run out of time. The hallowed measure became the first assembly vessel assigned to the new frontier. Commander Vale Orthus accepted command of the Watcher expedition, joined by human scientists, Pell navigators, and Vare physicists. Before departing, he visited the moon. Dr. Maya Okafor met him at the edge of the great fracture. Beyond the transparent observation shield, repair lights moved across the ancient weapon. Vale looked down at the black structure. "Will it fire again?" he asked. Maya considered the question. "Not in our lifetimes, I hope." And after that, she watched Earth rise above the lunar horizon. Someone will be here. Vale understood. That was humanity's answer to the dark. Not certainty, not conquest, not the promise that danger would never return. Only the quiet determination that when it did, someone would still be standing watch. Beneath the scarred moon, the weapon remained pointed away from every living world, toward the place where the stars had disappeared, toward the darkness that had once believed no one was waiting, and behind it stood humanity.